The gymnasium fell silent as Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez stepped onto the training mat, her boots echoing against the polished floor. 2,000 pairs of eyes followed her every movement, some filled with curiosity, others with doubt, and a few with barely concealed skepticism. She was about to attempt something that had never been done before in the history of the Special Operations Command, something that would either make her a legend or end her military career in spectacular failure. But this story doesn't begin with that moment of triumph or defeat. It begins 3 years earlier, in a small town in Texas where a young woman named Maria was told she would never amount to anything more than what her circumstances had predetermined for her. Maria Elena Rodriguez grew up in the border town of Laredo, Texas, where opportunities were scarce and dreams often withered under the harsh reality of economic hardship. The youngest of 4 children, she watched her older brother struggle to find steady work while her sister married young to escape the cycle of poverty that seemed to grip their neighborhood like a vice. Their father had worked construction until a back injury forced him into early retirement, and their mother cleaned offices at night to make ends meet. The Rodriguez household was filled with love, but short on hope for the future. Maria's parents had immigrated from Mexico with dreams of providing their children with opportunities they never had, but the American dream seemed increasingly elusive with each passing year. The local high school had a dropout rate that hovered near 40%, and college felt like a luxury reserved for families with resources the Rodriguez family simply didn't possess. Maria was different from her siblings, though she didn't realize it at first. While her brothers spent their afternoons playing pickup basketball and her sister focused on her appearance and boyfriends, Maria found herself drawn to physical challenges that others avoided. She would climb the tallest trees in their neighborhood, race her bicycle down the steepest hills, and challenge the boys to contests of strength and endurance that she often won. Her high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Patricia Hernandez, was the first person to recognize something special in Maria. During a routine meeting about course selection, Mrs. Hernandez noticed Maria's exceptional physical fitness scores and her surprisingly high marks in mathematics and science, subjects that many of her peers struggled with. "Have you ever thought about the military, Maria?" Mrs. Hernandez asked during one of their sessions. "I think you might have qualities that would serve you well." Maria had never seriously considered military service. Growing up in a predominantly Hispanic community where many families had complicated relationships with government institutions, the military seemed like something for other people. People who didn't look like her or come from where she came from. "I don't know anything about the military," Maria admitted. "And besides, my parents need help with expenses. I should probably get a job after graduation." Mrs. Hernandez leaned forward across her desk, her expression serious but encouraging. "Maria, you have something special. Your physical capabilities are remarkable, but more importantly, you have a mind that can solve complex problems under pressure. I've seen how you handle stress, how you help other students when they're struggling, and how you never give up when faced with a challenge. These are exactly the qualities the military values." Over the following weeks, Mrs. Hernandez arranged for Maria to meet with military recruiters from different branches. The Army recruiter talked about educational opportunities and steady pay. The Air Force representative discussed technical training and career advancement. The Navy recruiter mentioned seeing the world and learning valuable skills. But it was the Marine Corps recruiter, Gunnery Sergeant James Mitchell, who captured Maria's attention in a way she hadn't expected. Gunnery Sergeant Mitchell didn't focus on benefits or incentives. Instead, he talked about challenge, purpose, and the opportunity to discover what she was truly capable of achieving. "I'm not going to lie to you, Rodriguez," he said, using her last name in the way that would become familiar throughout her military career. "The Marines Corps isn't for everyone. We don't promise easy money or comfortable assignments. What we promise is that we'll push you beyond what you think is possible. And in the process, you'll become someone you never imagined you could be." Maria felt something stir inside her as he spoke. For the first time in her life, someone was offering her a challenge rather than making excuses for her circumstances. The idea of testing her limits, of proving that she could succeed in the most demanding environment possible, appealed to something deep in her character. The decision to enlist wasn't easy. Her parents worried about sending their youngest daughter into harm's way, especially their only daughter. Her friends thought she was crazy for choosing the Marines over the other branches, which they perceived as less demanding. Some people in her community questioned why she would want to serve a country that they felt had often failed to serve them. But Maria had made up her mind. On a warm Tuesday morning in May, just 3 weeks after her high school graduation, she stood in the military entrance processing station in San Antonio, raising her right hand to take the oath of enlistment. Her parents stood beside her, their faces a mixture of pride and concern as she committed herself to a path that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself. The bus ride to Marine Corps Recruit Depot Parris Island was Maria's first time leaving Texas. As the landscape changed outside the windows, she felt a mixture of excitement and terror that she would later recognize as the feeling that preceded every significant challenge in her military career. She had no way of knowing that this journey would eventually lead her to that gymnasium floor, facing 2,000 skeptical faces and attempting something that had never been done before. Parris Island in June was a shock to Maria's system in ways she hadn't anticipated. The humidity was overwhelming, the heat was oppressive, and the drill instructors seemed determined to break down every recruit to their most basic components before building them back up as Marines. But Maria discovered something about herself during those 13 weeks that surprised everyone, including herself. She thrived under pressure. While other recruits struggled with the physical demands of training, Maria found that her body adapted quickly to the rigorous exercise routines. The obstacle courses that left some recruits gasping for breath became puzzles for her to solve, finding more efficient ways to navigate each challenge. The forced marches that broke down weaker recruits became opportunities for her to encourage and support her fellow Marines in training. More importantly, she discovered that she had a natural ability to remain calm and think clearly when others panicked. During night navigation exercises, when recruits became disoriented and fearful in the darkness, Maria would quietly help guide them back on course. When drill instructors screamed contradictory orders designed to create confusion and stress, Maria would process the information quickly and respond appropriately, while others froze in indecision. Drill instructor Staff Sergeant Angela Torres was the first to recognize Maria's potential for leadership. Staff Sergeant Torres was a 15-year veteran who had served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and she had an eye for recruits who possessed the rare combination of physical capability and mental toughness that made exceptional Marines. Rodriguez, she called out after a particularly challenging day of training. "Walk with me." They walked along the edge of the parade deck as the sun set over the South Carolina marshlands, the air finally beginning to cool after another scorching day. Staff Sergeant Torres was quiet for several minutes, a silence that made Maria nervous despite her growing confidence in her abilities. "You know what I see when I look at you, Rodriguez?" Staff Sergeant Torres finally asked. "No, Staff Sergeant," Maria replied, maintaining the formal tone required of recruits. "I see potential that most people will never recognize, including yourself. You have something that can't be taught and can't be faked. You have the ability to perform when everything is falling apart around you. That's rare, and it's valuable." Staff Sergeant Torres stopped walking and turned to face Maria directly. "But potential means nothing if you don't have the courage to pursue it. After you graduate from here, you're going to have choices to make about what kind of Marine you want to become. You can take the safe path, do your job competently, serve your time honorably, and go home with stories to tell your grandchildren. Or you can choose to find out exactly what you're capable of achieving." Maria felt the weight of those words settling into her consciousness like seeds that would eventually grow into the ambition that would drive her toward that gymnasium floor years later. She didn't fully understand what Staff Sergeant Torres was suggesting, but she sensed that this conversation was important in a way that transcended the usual interactions between drill instructors and recruits. Graduation from Paris Island was one of the proudest moments of Maria's life. Her parents made the trip from Texas to watch her receive her eagle, globe, and anchor, the symbol that officially made her a United States Marine. Seeing the tears in her father's eyes as she stood at attention in her dress blue uniform made all the challenges of the previous 13 weeks feel worthwhile. But graduation from recruit training was only the beginning. Maria's next stop was the School of Infantry at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, where she would learn the specific skills needed for her chosen military occupational specialty. She had selected infantry, a field that had only recently been open to women and remained dominated by male Marines who weren't necessarily enthusiastic about the change. The School of Infantry presented challenges that were different from recruit training, but equally demanding. The focus shifted from general military bearing and basic skills to the specific knowledge needed to function as an infantry Marine in combat situations. Maria learned to operate and maintain various weapon systems, to move tactically across different types of terrain, and to work as part of a fire team in complex scenarios that simulated real combat conditions. Once again, Maria found herself excelling in areas where others struggled. Her marksmanship scores were consistently among the highest in her class. Her ability to navigate using map and compass was exceptional. Most importantly, she demonstrated the kind of tactical thinking and situational awareness that instructors noted in their evaluations. But it was during a field exercise in the third week of training that Maria had an encounter that would shape the direction of her military career. The exercise involved a nighttime patrol through dense woods, with the objective of reaching a designated target without being detected by opposing forces played by instructors. Maria's fire team had been moving carefully through the darkness for over an hour when they encountered an unexpected obstacle. A swollen creek, swelled by recent rains, blocked their planned route. The team leader, a young Marine named Collins who struggled with decision-making under pressure, froze as he tried to determine the best course of action. While Collins studied his map with a flashlight covered by a red filter, precious minutes ticked away. The longer they remained stationary, the greater the chance of being discovered by the opposing forces. Maria could hear movement in the woods around them and knew they needed to act quickly. "Collins," she whispered, "we need to move. Every second we stay here increases our chances of being compromised." "I know," Collins hissed back, his frustration evident in his voice. "But I can't figure out the best way around this creek." Maria studied the terrain around them, using her other senses to gather information that couldn't be seen in the darkness. She could hear the sound of water moving over rocks, indicating areas where the creek was shallow enough to cross. She could smell the dampness of the woods and feel the slight breeze that indicated open areas beyond the tree line. "Give me your map," she said quietly. Collins hesitated for a moment before handing over the map and red-filtered flashlight. Maria studied the topographical features for less than 30 seconds before identifying what she believed was the best crossing point. "There's a bend in the creek about 50 meters upstream," she explained, pointing to the map. "The water should be shallower there, and the tree line on the other side will give us concealment as we continue toward the objective." Collins looked uncertain, but the sound of approaching footsteps made the decision for him. "Lead the way," he whispered. Maria guided the team to the crossing point she had identified. The water was indeed shallow enough to cross without difficulty, and they were able to reach the other side without being detected. They completed the exercise successfully, reaching their objective ahead of schedule and without being discovered by the opposing forces. The next morning, during the after-action review, the instructor, Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, no relation to Maria despite sharing a surname, addressed the class about the previous night's exercise. "Most of you completed the mission, but I want to talk about what happened when Team 3 encountered that creek," he said, his gaze settling on Maria's fire team. "Collins, tell the class what happened." Collins stood up and recounted the events, including Maria's quick analysis of the situation and her suggestion for the crossing point. When he finished, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that separates good Marines from exceptional ones," he said. Rodriguez showed initiative, used available information to make a quick assessment, and provided a solution that allowed the team to complete the mission successfully. But, more importantly, she did it without undermining her team leader's authority. After class, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez asked Maria to remain behind. When the classroom had emptied, he approached her with an expression that she was learning to recognize as the look of an instructor who saw potential that needed to be developed. "Rodriguez, have you given any thought to what you want to do after you complete this training?" he asked. "Report to my unit and serve as an infantry marine, Staff Sergeant," Maria replied, giving the answer she thought was expected. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez smiled slightly. "That's the right answer, but it's not what I'm asking. I'm asking whether you've thought about challenging yourself beyond the standard expectations." Maria wasn't sure how to respond. She had focused so intently on succeeding in each phase of training that she hadn't given much thought to what might come after. There are opportunities in the Marine Corps for Marines who demonstrate exceptional capabilities, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez continued. Special operations, reconnaissance, specialized training programs. These opportunities require Marines who can think clearly under pressure, adapt to changing situations, and perform when failure is an option. Based on what I've observed, you might have what it takes to succeed in these more demanding roles. The idea intrigued Maria, but she also felt uncertain about whether she was ready for such challenges. "How would I find out about these opportunities, Staff Sergeant?" "First, you need to prove yourself as a Marine in a regular unit. But while you're doing that, you should be preparing yourself for the possibility of attempting selection for special programs. That means maintaining exceptional physical fitness, continuing to develop your tactical knowledge, and looking for opportunities to take on additional responsibilities and challenges." That conversation planted another seed in Maria's mind, joining the one that Staff Sergeant Torres had planted at Paris Island. She began to envision a military career that went beyond simply serving her time and returning home. She began to imagine testing herself against the most demanding challenges the Marine Corps could offer. When Maria graduated from School of Infantry, she was assigned to the 2nd Marine Division at Camp Lejeune. Her first unit was 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines, where she would serve as a rifleman in a standard infantry company. It was exactly what she had expected when she enlisted, but her conversations with Staff Sergeant Torres and Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had opened her mind to possibilities that extended far beyond the typical experience of a Marine infantryman. The transition from training environment to operational unit presented new challenges that Maria hadn't anticipated. In training, everyone was focused on learning and improving. In the fleet, she encountered Marines with varying levels of motivation, experience, and commitment to excellence. Some were exceptional professionals who took pride in their service and constantly worked to improve their capabilities. Others seemed to view their military service as simply a job to be endured until they could return to civilian life. Maria's company commander, Captain Jennifer Walsh, was a Naval Academy graduate who had deployed to Afghanistan as a platoon commander and understood the realities of combat operations. Captain Walsh had also been one of the first female officers to serve in infantry units and was keenly aware of the challenges facing women who were breaking new ground in previously male-dominated fields. During Maria's initial interview with Captain Walsh, the captain asked probing questions about Maria's goals and aspirations. Maria found herself being more honest about her ambitions than she had been with previous commanders. "Captain, I want to find out what I'm capable of achieving," Maria said. "I know that I'm new and inexperienced, but I'm willing to work harder than anyone else to earn opportunities to take on greater challenges." Captain Walsh studied Maria carefully before responding. "I appreciate your honesty and your ambition, Rodriguez, but I need to be clear about something. Being a female Marine in the infantry means that some people will be looking for reasons to doubt your capabilities. Every mistake you make will be scrutinized more carefully than the same mistake made by a male Marine. Every success you achieve will be attributed to lowered standards rather than your own abilities. If you're serious about pursuing challenging opportunities, you need to be better than good. You need to be exceptional." Maria felt the weight of those words, but rather than being discouraged, she found them motivating. She understood that the path she was choosing would require her to prove herself repeatedly in ways that others might never have to face. But she also understood that overcoming those challenges would make her stronger and more capable than she ever thought possible. Her first year with 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines was dedicated to mastering the fundamental skills of an infantry marine while simultaneously preparing for the additional challenges she hoped to face in the future. She volunteered for every additional duty, attended every optional training session, and spent her free time studying tactics, strategy, and the history of special operations. The other Marines in her platoon initially viewed her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Some were openly supportive, recognizing her work ethic and competence. Others were more reserved, waiting to see whether she would prove herself over time. A few were openly hostile, resentful of the changes taking place in their traditionally male-dominated profession. Maria's approach to these challenges was to focus on her performance rather than on changing minds through arguments or confrontation. She arrived early for every training exercise, stayed late to help with equipment maintenance, and consistently performed at the highest levels during physical fitness tests and field exercises. Her breakthrough moment came during a battalion-level exercise designed to simulate complex combat operations. Maria's platoon was assigned to conduct a night raid on a simulated enemy position, a mission that required precise coordination, stealth, and the ability to adapt when things didn't go according to plan. As often happens in military exercises, things began to go wrong almost immediately. The helicopter insertion was delayed by weather, forcing the platoon to adjust their timeline. When they finally reached their insertion point, they discovered that recent construction had changed the terrain features they had studied on their maps. Most challenging of all, the radio communication with headquarters was intermittent, making it difficult to coordinate with supporting units. Maria's squad leader, Sergeant Mike Thompson, was an experienced Marine who had deployed to Afghanistan, but he struggled to adapt to the rapidly changing situation. As the mission began to fall apart, Maria found herself in a position where she could either watch the exercise fail or risk overstepping her role as a junior Marine by offering suggestions. She chose to act. "Sergeant Thompson," she said quietly, approaching her squad leader during a brief halt. "I think I see a way to get back on track." Sergeant Thompson looked at her with surprise, but nodded for her to continue. Maria quickly outlined a plan that would adjust their route to account for the terrain changes, modify their timeline to compensate for the delayed insertion, and use visual signals to coordinate with other squads when radio communication failed. Her plan was based on the tactical principles they had learned in training, but adapted to the specific challenges they were facing. Sergeant Thompson studied her suggestions for a moment before nodding approvingly. "That could work," he said. "Let's try it." The modified plan worked better than anyone had expected. Maria's squad successfully reached their objective ahead of schedule, coordinated effectively with the other squads using her visual signaling system, and completed the simulated raid without any major problems. During the after-action review the next morning, the exercise controllers specifically mentioned Maria's contributions to the mission's success. Colonel David Martinez, the battalion commander, asked Maria to explain her reasoning for the tactical adjustments she had suggested. Maria stood before the assembled Marines and officers, feeling the weight of their attention, but maintaining her composure. She clearly and concisely explained her analysis of the situation, the factors she had considered in developing her recommendations, and the principles she had applied in adapting the original plan. When she finished, Colonel Martinez nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need from our Marines," he said. "The ability to analyze a changing situation, identify solutions, and implement those solutions under pressure." Rodriguez, see me after this briefing. Maria's meeting with Colonel Martinez would prove to be another pivotal moment in her military career. The colonel had served in special operations before taking command of the battalion, and he recognized the qualities that made successful special operators. "Rodriguez," he said, "I've been watching your performance since you arrived in the battalion. Your technical skills are solid, Your physical fitness is excellent, and your ability to think tactically is exceptional. But what impresses me most is your composure under pressure and your willingness to take initiative when the situation demands it. Maria listened carefully, sensing that this conversation was leading toward an opportunity she had been hoping for. Colonel Martinez continued, I think you should consider applying for reconnaissance training. The reconnaissance Marines are the eyes and ears of the Marine Expeditionary Force, operating in small teams behind enemy lines to gather critical intelligence. The training is extremely demanding, both physically and mentally, and the failure rate is high. But for those who succeed, it offers the opportunity to serve at the highest levels of military operations. The suggestion both excited and terrified Maria. Reconnaissance Marines were among the elite units in the Marine Corps, and she had read about their demanding selection process and challenging missions. The idea of attempting such training felt like the natural next step in her evolution as a Marine, but she also understood that failure would likely end her hopes of serving in special operations. What I need to do to prepare for reconnaissance training, sir? She asked. Colonel Martinez smiled, recognizing the determination in her voice. The first step is to continue performing at the exceptional level you've already established. But beyond that, you need to focus on the specific skills that reconnaissance Marines require. Long-distance swimming, advanced land navigation, detailed observation, and reporting skills. Most importantly, you need to develop the mental toughness required to operate in small teams under the most challenging conditions imaginable. That conversation marked the beginning of an intensive preparation period that would consume Maria's life for the next 18 months. In addition to her regular duties with the battalion, she began a punishing training regimen designed to prepare her for reconnaissance selection. She woke up every morning at 0400 to run long distances, building the cardiovascular endurance required for reconnaissance missions. She spent her lunch breaks in the base swimming pool, developing the water confidence needed for maritime operations. She used her evenings to study reconnaissance tactics, memorizing the procedures and techniques used by reconnaissance teams. Most challenging of all, she sought out opportunities to test her mental resilience and stress tolerance. She volunteered for the most difficult training exercises, took on leadership roles that pushed her beyond her comfort zone, and deliberately placed herself in situations where failure would be highly visible and professionally damaging. Her dedication didn't go unnoticed by her fellow Marines or her chain of command. Captain Walsh became an unofficial mentor, providing guidance on how to balance her preparation activities with her duties as a member of the battalion. Sergeant Thompson, who had initially been skeptical of her abilities, became one of her strongest supporters, going out of his way to create training opportunities that would help her develop the skills she needed. But it was during a deployment to Okinawa, Japan, that Maria faced the test that would ultimately determine whether she was ready to attempt reconnaissance training. The battalion was participating in a large-scale exercise with Japanese self-defense forces, and Maria's company was assigned to conduct a reconnaissance mission that would require them to operate independently for several days while gathering intelligence on simulated enemy positions. The jungle humidity of Okinawa felt like a living thing, wrapping around Maria's body like a suffocating blanket as she crouched motionless behind a fallen tree. She had been in the same position for over 3 hours, observing the simulated enemy compound through her binoculars while mentally cataloging every detail that would be crucial to her mission report. The exercise was designed to test the reconnaissance capabilities of selected Marines, and Maria knew that her performance over the next 48 hours would determine whether Colonel Martinez would recommend her for reconnaissance training. The mission had begun 2 days earlier when Captain Walsh pulled Maria aside after the morning formation. Rodriguez, you've been selected for a special assignment during this exercise, she had explained. You'll be working directly with Major Stevens from the intelligence section, conducting reconnaissance on a priority target. This is exactly the kind of mission that reconnaissance Marines conduct in real operations. Major Stevens was a career intelligence officer who had worked with reconnaissance Marines throughout his career, and He understood the demanding standards required for success in special operations. When he briefed Maria on the mission, he was direct about the challenges she would face. "This isn't a typical training exercise," Rodriguez, he had explained while showing her aerial photographs of the target area. "You'll be operating alone in difficult terrain, gathering detailed intelligence on a defended position, and then extracting without being detected. The opposing forces have been specifically briefed to make this as realistic as possible. If you're discovered, the exercise is over and you'll be considered unsuccessful." The target was a simulated command post located in a heavily wooded area approximately 15 kilometers from Maria's insertion point. Her mission was to observe the facility for 24 hours, document the defensive positions, identify key personnel, and determine the best approach routes for a potential assault. She would then have to extract to a pickup point another 10 kilometers away, all while avoiding the patrols that were actively searching for her. Maria had spent the previous evening studying every detail of the terrain, memorizing topographical features, identifying potential observation positions, and planning multiple routes to and from the target. She had reduced her equipment to the absolute essentials: water, emergency rations, observation equipment, communication gear, and her rifle. Every item had been selected for its necessity and weight because she would be carrying everything on her back for the duration of the mission. The insertion had gone smoothly, with Maria dropped off at a pre-designated point during the pre-dawn darkness. She had immediately moved away from the drop zone and established her first checkpoint, confirming her position using terrain association and GPS coordinates. From there, she had begun the careful approach to her target, moving slowly through the dense vegetation while constantly checking for signs of the opposing forces that were hunting for her. Now, as she maintained her vigil over the enemy compound, Maria found herself drawing on every skill she had developed during her years of training and preparation. The physical discomfort of remaining motionless for hours at a time was challenging, but she had prepared for this through countless hours of training in uncomfortable positions. The mental strain of maintaining absolute concentration while fighting off fatigue was demanding, but she had developed techniques for staying alert during extended periods of observation. More challenging than the physical and mental demands, however, was the emotional pressure of knowing that her performance was being evaluated at every moment. She knew that reconnaissance Marines regularly conducted similar missions in real combat situations, where the stakes were life and death rather than career advancement. The thought both intimidated and motivated her, reminding her that this exercise was preparation for responsibilities that would have genuine consequences. As the afternoon wore on, Maria's attention was drawn to increased activity around the command post. Personnel were moving with greater urgency, and she could see additional defensive positions being established. Through her binoculars, she observed what appeared to be a high-ranking officer arriving at the facility, accompanied by additional security personnel. This presented Maria with a dilemma that she hadn't anticipated. Her original mission had been to observe routine activities at the command post, but the arrival of what appeared to be a high-value target created an opportunity to gather intelligence that could be significantly more valuable. However, getting close enough to identify the individual and document his activities would require her to move from her concealed position, increasing her risk of detection. Maria weighed the options carefully, considering both the potential value of the additional intelligence and the increased risk of mission failure. She thought about the conversation she had had with her mentors, remembering Staff Sergeant Torres's advice about having the courage to pursue her potential and Colonel Martinez's emphasis on the importance of taking initiative when the situation demanded it. She decided to accept the additional risk. Maria spent several minutes studying the terrain around the command post, identifying a route that would bring her closer to the facility while providing adequate concealment. She would have to cross approximately 200 meters of open ground, but she had identified a depression that would provide cover for most of the movement. The timing would be critical, as she would need to move during a period when the sentries were focused elsewhere. The opportunity came during a shift change among the security personnel. Maria moved quickly but carefully across the open ground, using the depression she had identified to remain hidden from the observation posts. When she reached her new position, she was close enough to the command post to observe individual faces and overhear conversations. What she discovered exceeded her expectations. The high-ranking officer was actually the exercise commander, conducting an inspection of the simulated enemy position. Maria was able to identify several key personnel, document the specific defensive measures being employed, and gather detailed information about the command structure of the opposing forces. But her success came at a cost. As she prepared to withdraw from her advanced position, Maria noticed increased patrol activity in the area. The opposing forces had apparently detected signs of her presence and were conducting a systematic search of the surrounding terrain. Her original extraction route was no longer viable, and she would need to find an alternative way to reach her pickup point. Maria studied her map carefully, identifying several possible routes while mentally calculating the risks and benefits of each option. The most direct route would take her through an area where she had observed patrol activity, but it would also get her to the pickup point with time to spare. The safer routes would require significantly more time and energy, and there was a risk that she might miss her scheduled extraction window. Once again, Maria found herself facing a decision that would test not only her technical skills, but her judgment and mental toughness. She chose a compromise route that balanced speed and safety, accepting some additional risk in order to maintain her schedule while avoiding the areas of heaviest patrol activity. The movement to her extraction point became a cat-and-mouse game that lasted throughout the night. Maria could hear the search teams moving through the forest around her, their radio communications providing her with valuable information about their locations and intentions. She used this intelligence to avoid contact while continuing to move toward her objective. Several times during the night, Maria found herself within a few meters of search teams, lying motionless in the underbrush while Marines passed nearby. The experience was both terrifying and exhilarating, providing her with a glimpse of what reconnaissance Marines experience during actual combat operations. As dawn approached, Maria reached her extraction point with 15 minutes to spare. She was exhausted, dehydrated, and covered in insect bites, but she had successfully completed her mission without being detected. When the pickup vehicle arrived, she was ready with a detailed report of everything she had observed during her 24 hours of surveillance. The after-action review took place that afternoon, with Major Stevens and Colonel Martinez both present to evaluate Maria's performance. She presented her findings in a clear, organized manner, providing detailed descriptions of the defensive positions, accurate sketches of the facility layout, and precise identification of key personnel. When she finished her presentation, Major Stevens nodded approvingly. "Outstanding work, Rodriguez. You gathered exactly the kind of intelligence that would be valuable in a real operation, and you did it under challenging conditions that tested your technical skills, physical endurance, and mental toughness." Colonel Martinez was equally impressed. "What impresses me most is the initiative you showed in adapting to changing circumstances. When you identified the high-value target, you made a tactical decision to accept additional risk in order to gather more valuable intelligence. When your original extraction route was compromised, you successfully adapted your plan and completed the mission. These are exactly the kinds of decisions that reconnaissance Marines have to make in combat." But the most significant feedback came from Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Kim, a reconnaissance Marine who had been observing the exercise as an evaluator. Gunnery Sergeant Kim had served multiple combat deployments with reconnaissance units and understood the demands of special operations better than anyone else present. "Rodriguez," she said, "I've been evaluating Marines for reconnaissance training for over 10 years, and I can tell you that what you accomplished during this exercise demonstrates the potential for success in our community. But I want you to understand that this exercise was just a glimpse of what reconnaissance training will demand from you." Gunnery Sergeant Kim went on to describe the selection process for reconnaissance Marines, explaining the physical and mental challenges that candidates faced during the training pipeline. The failure rate was approximately 60%, and even Marines who succeeded in the initial training faced additional schools and qualifications before they were considered fully operational. If you're serious about pursuing this path, Gunnery Sergeant Kim continued, you need to prepare yourself for the most demanding training you've ever experienced. The physical requirements alone will push you beyond anything you've faced so far. But the mental challenges are even more demanding. You'll be tested in ways that will make you question everything you think you know about yourself. Maria listened intently to every word, absorbing the information while simultaneously feeling her determination growing stronger. The challenges that Gunnery Sergeant Kim described didn't discourage her, they excited her. She had been searching for an opportunity to discover her true capabilities, and reconnaissance training represented the ultimate test. Gunnery Sergeant, Maria said, how do I begin the process of applying for reconnaissance training? The application process was more complex than Maria had anticipated. Beyond the basic administrative requirements, she needed endorsement from her chain of command, physical fitness scores that exceeded standard requirements, and completion of several prerequisite schools. Most challenging of all, she needed to pass a preliminary screening that would test her suitability for special operations training. Colonel Martinez agreed to provide his endorsement, but he was clear about his expectations. Rodriguez, I'm willing to support your application because I believe you have the potential to succeed. But I want you to understand that this reflection on our entire battalion. If you fail because you weren't adequately prepared, it reflects poorly on your leadership and your unit. I expect you to represent us with distinction. Captain Walsh took a more personal interest in Maria's preparation, helping her develop a training schedule that would address the specific requirements of reconnaissance selection. Maria, she said during one of their planning sessions, you've already proven that you have the technical skills and physical capabilities required for this training. What you need to focus on now is mental preparation. Captain Walsh arranged for Maria to spend time with Marines who had completed reconnaissance training, learning about their experiences and gaining insights into what she could expect. These conversations were both encouraging and sobering, as the veterans shared stories of the physical and mental challenges they had faced. Staff Sergeant David Chun had completed reconnaissance training 3 years earlier and was currently serving with a reconnaissance battalion. His description of the selection process was detailed and intimidating. The first few days are designed to identify Marines who aren't serious about the training, he explained. The physical demands are extreme, but they're manageable if you've prepared properly. What eliminates most people is the mental pressure. You'll be sleep-deprived, stressed, and constantly evaluated. Some people break down under that pressure. Staff Sergeant Chin also emphasized the importance of teamwork in reconnaissance operations. Individual excellence is important, but reconnaissance Marines operate in small teams where every member has to be completely reliable. During training, you'll be evaluated on your ability to work with others under stress, to support teammates who are struggling, and to maintain team cohesion when everything is falling apart. This aspect of reconnaissance training particularly appealed to Maria, who had always been motivated by opportunities to help others succeed. She had observed during her time in the infantry that some of her most satisfying moments had come when she was able to assist fellow Marines in overcoming challenges or achieving their goals. The preliminary screening took place 6 months after the Okinawa exercise at a facility that specialized in evaluating candidates for special operations training. Maria arrived with a mixture of confidence and nervousness, knowing that this screening would determine whether she would have the opportunity to attempt reconnaissance training. The physical fitness test was more demanding than anything she had experienced in her military career. Beyond the standard requirements of pull-ups, sit-ups, and running, the screening included swimming events, obstacle courses, and endurance challenges that tested her limits in every area. Maria's preparation paid off during the physical events. She completed every requirement well within the established time limits, and her scores placed her among the top performers in her group. But she understood that physical fitness was only one component of the evaluation process. The psychological evaluation was unlike anything she had experienced. Over the course of several hours, she was interviewed by psychologists who probed her motivations, explored her responses to stress, and evaluated her mental resilience. The questions were designed to identify potential weaknesses that might emerge under the extreme pressure of special operations training. "Why do you want to become a reconnaissance Marine?" one of the evaluators asked. Maria had prepared for this question, but she found herself giving a more honest answer than she had planned. "I want to discover what I'm capable of achieving," she said. "I've been challenging myself throughout my military career, and each time I've succeeded at something I thought might be impossible. Reconnaissance training represents the ultimate test of my capabilities, and I need to know whether I can meet that challenge." The evaluator pressed further. "What will you do if you fail?" "I'll learn from the failure and find another way to challenge myself," Maria replied. "But I don't plan to fail. I prepared for this opportunity for over 2 years, and I'm ready to give everything I have to succeed." The final component of the screening was a leadership evaluation that placed candidates in stressful situations and observed their responses. Maria was assigned to lead a team of other candidates through a series of problem-solving exercises that required them to work together under time pressure while dealing with incomplete information and conflicting priorities. During one particularly challenging scenario, Maria found herself leading a team that included 2 candidates who couldn't agree on the best approach to their assigned problem. The disagreement was consuming valuable time and creating tension that threatened to undermine their performance. Maria realized that she needed to take decisive action to resolve the conflict and refocus the team on their objective. She listened to both perspectives, identified the valid points in each argument, and proposed a compromise solution that incorporated the best elements of both approaches. "We're spending too much time debating when we should be acting," she told her team. "Both of your ideas have merit, but we need to choose one approach and execute it well rather than continuing to argue about which approach is theoretically better." Her team accepted her leadership and successfully completed the exercise within the allotted time. During the debrief, the evaluator noted Maria's ability to identify the real problem, team dysfunction rather than the technical challenge, and address it effectively. The screening process concluded with a final interview that would determine whether Maria would be selected for reconnaissance training. The interview panel included senior reconnaissance Marines who would make the final decision about her suitability for their community. Master Sergeant Robert Taylor led the interview panel and was known throughout the reconnaissance community for his high standards and direct communication style. He had served in every major conflict of the previous 15 years and understood the qualities required for success in special operations. "Rodriguez," Master Sergeant Taylor began, "you've performed well during this screening, but I want to be clear about what you're signing up for. Reconnaissance training is designed to push Marines beyond their breaking point and then determine who has the strength to keep going. Many of the Marines who attempt this training are eliminated not because they lack physical capabilities, but because they discover that they don't have the mental toughness required for this level of performance." Maria listened carefully, appreciating the honesty of Master Sergeant Taylor's assessment. She had learned during her military career that the most valuable feedback often came from leaders who were willing to be direct about challenges and expectations. "I understand that the training will be extremely demanding, Master Sergeant," Maria replied. "But I've been preparing for this opportunity for over 2 years, and I believe that I have the mental toughness required to succeed. Every challenge I've faced in my career has made me stronger and more confident in my abilities." Master Sergeant Taylor studied Maria for a moment before continuing. "What concerns me is that you've been successful in everything you've attempted so far. Reconnaissance training may be the first time you face a challenge that pushes you to the point of failure. How will you respond when you encounter something that you can't overcome through preparation and determination alone?" The question caught Maria off guard because it addressed a vulnerability she had recognized but hadn't fully acknowledged. Her success throughout her military career had been built on her ability to outwork and outprepare her peers but reconnaissance training might demand capabilities that couldn't be developed through effort alone. Master Sergeant, I think that discovering my limits might be exactly what I need to experience, Maria answered after a moment of reflection. I've been successful so far, but I've also been playing it relatively safe. I've chosen challenges that I believed I could overcome. Reconnaissance training represents a challenge where failure is a real possibility, and I think facing that possibility will either reveal capabilities I didn't know I possessed or teach me lessons that I can't learn any other way. The interview continued for another 30 minutes, with the panel probing various aspects of Maria's background, motivations, and preparedness for special operations training. When it concluded, Master Sergeant Taylor explained that she would receive notification of the panel's decision within 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks felt like an eternity to Maria. She continued her regular duties with the battalion while mentally preparing herself for either outcome. If she was selected for reconnaissance training, she would need to complete several prerequisite schools before beginning the actual selection process. If she wasn't selected, she would need to decide whether to pursue other special operations opportunities or focus on excellence in her current role. The notification arrived on a Thursday morning in the form of a phone call from Master Sergeant Taylor. Rodriguez, congratulations. You've been selected for reconnaissance training. Report to the reconnaissance training company next month to begin your preparation pipeline. The news was both exhilarating and terrifying. Maria had achieved the goal she had been working toward for over 2 years, but she also understood that the most challenging part of her journey was just beginning. Reconnaissance training would test every aspect of her preparation and potentially reveal whether she truly possessed the capabilities required for special operations. Her remaining time with 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines was spent completing final administrative requirements and conducting turnover procedures with her replacement. Colonel Martinez called her into his office for a final conversation before she departed for training. Rodriguez, he said, you've represented this battalion with distinction throughout your time here. I'm confident that you'll continue to represent us well during reconnaissance training. But I want you to remember that this training is about more than individual achievement. You're part of a team, and your success depends on your ability to support your teammates while they support you. Captain Walsh offered more personal advice during their final meeting. Maria, you've prepared for this training better than anyone I've ever seen. But preparation can only take you so far. When the training becomes more difficult than anything you've experienced, remember that you have the support of everyone who has invested in your success. Don't be afraid to draw on that strength when you need it. The day before Maria departed for reconnaissance training, she received an unexpected phone call from Staff Sergeant Torres, her drill instructor from Parris Island. Somehow, Staff Sergeant Torres had learned about Maria's selection for reconnaissance training and wanted to offer her congratulations. Rodriguez, Staff Sergeant Torres said, I remember our conversation on the parade deck when you were a recruit. I told you that you had potential that most people would never recognize. You've proven me right, but more importantly, you've proven to yourself that you can achieve anything you set your mind to. The conversation reminded Maria of how far she had traveled from that small town in Texas, where people had told her she would never amount to anything. She thought about her parents, who had supported her decisions even when they didn't fully understand them. She thought about the mentors who had recognized her potential and helped her develop it. Most of all, she thought about the young woman who had raised her hand in that processing station in San Antonio, committing herself to a journey she couldn't have imagined. As Maria packed her gear for reconnaissance training, she felt the familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension that had preceded every major challenge in her military career. But this time, the feeling was more intense because she understood that she was about to face the ultimate test of everything she had learned and everything she believed about herself. The bus ride to the reconnaissance training facility was reminiscent of her trip to Parris Island years earlier, but Maria was a different person now. She was no longer the uncertain young woman who had enlisted to escape limited opportunities. She was a Marine who had proven herself in multiple challenging situations and who had earned the respect of her peers and superiors. But reconnaissance training would strip away all of those previous achievements and evaluate her based solely on her performance under the most demanding conditions possible. Everything she had accomplished so far had prepared her for this moment, but success would depend on her ability to reach deeper into her reserves of strength and determination than ever before. The alarm clock screamed at 0445, but Maria had been awake for 20 minutes, staring at the ceiling of her barracks room and mentally preparing for what would either be the most transformative or most devastating day of her military career. Today marked the beginning of the actual reconnaissance selection course, following 3 months of prerequisite training that had already eliminated 30% of the candidates who had started the program. Those preliminary months have been demanding in their own right, testing the candidates' basic qualifications in areas ranging from advanced swimming and diving techniques to complex navigation and communication procedures. Maria had excelled in the technical aspects of the training, but she had also observed the gradual attrition of Marines who discovered that the demands of reconnaissance training exceeded their capabilities or their commitment to success. The reconnaissance training facility was located in a remote area that provided the instructors with unlimited opportunities to create challenging and realistic training scenarios. The terrain included mountains, swamps, coastal areas, and dense forests, all of which would be utilized during the selection process to test the candidates under every possible environmental condition. As Maria joined the formation of 28 remaining candidates, she felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and nervousness that had become her constant companion throughout her military career. But this time, the feeling was amplified because she understood that the next 6 weeks would determine whether she would achieve her goal of becoming a reconnaissance Marine or return to her previous unit with the knowledge that she had failed at the most important challenge of her life. The selection course began with a briefing from the course commander, Major Patricia Rodriguez, coincidentally sharing Maria's surname, who had earned her reputation as one of the most respected reconnaissance Marines in the Corps. Major Rodriguez was a veteran of multiple combat deployments who understood both the technical requirements and the psychological demands of reconnaissance operations. Ladies and gentlemen, Major Rodriguez began, her voice carrying across the formation with unmistakable authority. You are about to begin the most demanding training in the United States Marine Corps. Over the next 6 weeks, you will be tested physically, mentally, and emotionally in ways that will push you beyond anything you have previously experienced. She paused, allowing her words to sink in before continuing. Some of you will discover capabilities you didn't know you possessed. Others will discover that your limitations are more restrictive than you believed. Both discoveries are valuable, but only one will result in your continuation in this program. Major Rodriguez explained that the selection process was designed around the principle of progressive stress, with each week introducing new challenges while maintaining the cumulative pressure of all previous requirements. Candidates would be evaluated constantly, with no single event determining their success or failure, but rather their overall performance across all areas of assessment. You will not be competing against each other, she emphasized. You will be competing against the standard, and that standard is based on the requirements of reconnaissance operations in combat. Every evaluation, every exercise, and every challenge has been designed to determine whether you possess the capabilities required to serve effectively in a reconnaissance unit, where failure can result in the death of Marines and the failure of critical missions. The first week of selection focused on basic reconnaissance skills under increasing stress and fatigue. The candidates began each day with physical fitness training that exceeded anything they had experienced in their regular units. The morning runs started at 5 miles and gradually increased throughout the week. Swimming events included not only distance swimming, but also underwater recovery exercises and treading water while carrying equipment. Maria found that her years of preparation served her well during the physical challenges. While some candidates struggled to complete the required events within the established time limits, she consistently finished well ahead of the minimum standards. But she also observed that physical fitness alone was insufficient for success, as several candidates who excelled in individual events struggled when the physical demands were combined with other requirements. The land navigation exercises during the first week introduced a level of complexity that Maria had never encountered. Rather than simply moving from one point to another, candidates were required to navigate precisely to multiple checkpoints while carrying increasingly heavy loads and operating under time constraints that left no margin for error. During one particularly challenging navigation exercise, Maria found herself moving through dense forest in complete darkness, carrying a 60-pound pack while attempting to locate a series of checkpoints that were marked only by small reflectors visible with night vision equipment. The route required her to traverse steep terrain, cross water obstacles, and navigate around areas that were designated as off-limits due to the presence of opposing forces. As she approached what she believed to be her third checkpoint, Maria discovered that another candidate, Corporal James Martinez, was struggling with equipment failure that prevented him from completing the exercise. His night vision goggles had malfunctioned, leaving him essentially blind in the darkness and unable to continue toward his remaining objectives. Maria faced a dilemma that would test not only her technical skills, but also her judgment and values. She could continue on her own route, ensuring that she completed her own exercise within the required time limit. Alternatively, she could assist Corporal Martinez, but doing so would likely prevent both of them from completing the exercise successfully within the established time frame. The decision came down to Maria's understanding of what reconnaissance Marines valued most highly. Throughout her conversations with reconnaissance veterans, she had learned that the ability to operate as part of a team was considered more important than individual excellence. Reconnaissance Marines operated in small teams where every member depended completely on the others for survival and mission success. Maria made her decision quickly. "Martinez," she called softly, "I'm coming to your position. We're going to complete this exercise together." She spent several minutes helping Corporal Martinez troubleshoot his equipment, eventually determining that the problem could not be fixed in the field. Using her own night vision goggles, she guided both of them through the remaining checkpoints, alternating the use of the equipment between them to ensure that they could both complete the navigation requirements. They finished the exercise 7 minutes after the official time limit, technically failing to meet the standard. But when they reported their completion to the evaluating instructor, Staff Sergeant Michael Thompson, he seemed more interested in their explanation of what had happened than in their completion time. "Rodriguez," Staff Sergeant Thompson said, "explain your decision to assist Martinez instead of completing your own exercise on time." Maria had prepared for this question during the final portion of their movement to the last checkpoint. "Staff Sergeant, I understood that completing the exercise on time was important, but I also understood that reconnaissance Marines operate as teams where individual success is meaningless if the team fails. Martinez had equipment failure that was beyond his control, and I believed that the more important test was whether I would prioritize my individual performance or the success of both of us." Staff Sergeant Thompson nodded approvingly. That's exactly the kind of thinking that makes successful reconnaissance Marines. Individual excellence is important, but it's worthless if you can't work as part of a team. Later, Maria learned that the equipment failure had been deliberately induced by the instructors to test the candidates' responses to unexpected situations and their willingness to support teammates in distress. Her decision to assist Corporal Martinez had been noted as an indicator of her suitability for reconnaissance operations. The second week of selection introduced live-fire exercises that combine marksmanship with physical stress and tactical decision-making. The candidates were required to engage targets accurately after completing exhausting physical events, simulating the conditions that reconnaissance Marines faced during actual combat operations. During one memorable exercise, Maria and 3 other candidates were required to complete a 2-mile run carrying full equipment, immediately followed by a swimming event, and then engage a series of targets at various distances with both rifles and pistols. The challenge was not only to hit the targets accurately, but to do so while dealing with the physical stress and mental fatigue that affected concentration and fine motor skills. Maria had always been a competent marksman, but she discovered that maintaining accuracy while exhausted required mental discipline that went beyond technical shooting skills. She learned to control her breathing, manage her heart rate, and focus her concentration despite the physical discomfort and time pressure. But the most valuable lesson of the second week came during a nighttime infiltration exercise that required the candidates to move undetected through an area defended by instructors equipped with night vision equipment and motion sensors. The exercise was designed to test not only their technical skills in camouflage and movement, but their ability to think tactically while operating under extreme stress. Maria's approach to the exercise was methodical and patient. Rather than attempting to move quickly through the defended area, she spent considerable time studying the terrain and the defensive positions, identifying patterns in the sentry's movements, and finding routes that would minimize her exposure to detection. Her patience paid off when she successfully infiltrated to the target area without being detected, becoming one of only 4 candidates to complete the exercise successfully. But more importantly, she learned valuable lessons about the importance of thorough planning and careful execution in reconnaissance operations. The third week introduced what the instructors called stress inoculation, a series of exercises designed to test the candidates' performance under psychological pressure that exceeded anything they had previously experienced. The candidates were subjected to sleep deprivation, sensory disorientation, and simulated interrogation scenarios that challenged their mental resilience. During one particularly intense exercise, Maria was blindfolded and subjected to hours of loud noise, uncomfortable temperatures, and physical discomfort while being questioned repeatedly about fictional information that she was supposed to protect. The exercise was designed to test her ability to maintain her composure and stick to her cover story despite increasing physical and psychological pressure. Maria found that her experience with extended periods of observation and surveillance had prepared her well for the mental aspects of stress inoculation. She had learned to compartmentalize discomfort and maintain focus on her objectives despite physical and emotional challenges. But she also discovered that some of her fellow candidates struggled with the psychological pressure in ways that surprised her. One candidate, Lance Corporal Stephen Davis, had been among the strongest performers during the physical events, but began to show signs of mental breakdown during the stress inoculation exercises. Maria watched with concern as Davis became increasingly agitated and disoriented, eventually requiring medical attention and withdrawal from the program. The experience reinforced Maria's understanding that reconnaissance selection was designed to identify not just physical capabilities, but the complete range of attributes required for special operations. Mental toughness, emotional stability, and psychological resilience were just as important as strength, endurance, and technical skills. The fourth week focused on advanced reconnaissance techniques, including long-range observation, intelligence gathering, and communication procedures. The candidates learned to use sophisticated equipment for surveillance and reporting, but they also learned that the most important tool in reconnaissance operations was the human mind's ability to observe, analyze, and communicate critical information accurately. During a 5-day field exercise that simulated a deep reconnaissance mission, Maria was assigned to a 4-person team tasked with observing a simulated enemy facility and reporting on activities, personnel, and defensive measures. The exercise required them to remain undetected for the entire period while gathering detailed intelligence and transmitting reports according to a rigid schedule. Maria's team established their observation post in a location that provided excellent visibility of the target while offering concealment from the opposing forces that were actively searching for them. Over the course of 5 days, they maintained a constant watch on the facility, documenting every significant activity and identifying patterns that would be valuable for planning potential operations against the target. The most challenging aspect of the exercise was not the technical requirements of observation and reporting, but the psychological strain of remaining in a confined space with 3 other people under stressful conditions for an extended period. Maria learned that successful reconnaissance operations required not only individual excellence, but the ability to maintain team cohesion under conditions that tested everyone's patience and composure. Her team's performance during the exercise was rated as exceptional by the evaluating instructors, but Maria understood that their success had been built on their ability to support each other when individual motivation flagged. She observed that the most successful reconnaissance teams were not necessarily composed of the strongest individual performers, but rather of Marines who could work together effectively under the most challenging conditions. The 5th week introduced combat skills training that combined all of the technical and psychological challenges of the previous weeks with the additional stress of simulated combat operations. The candidates learned advanced tactics for small unit operations, including raids, ambushes, and direct action missions that reconnaissance teams might be required to conduct in addition to their intelligence gathering responsibilities. During a complex exercise that simulated a combat operation behind enemy lines, Maria's team was assigned to conduct a raid on a defended position, capture specific intelligence materials, and extract to a predetermined location while avoiding pursuit by opposing forces. The exercise required them to apply everything they had learned about reconnaissance techniques, while also demonstrating competence in direct combat operations. The mission began with a detailed planning phase that tested the candidate's ability to analyze intelligence, identify potential problems, and develop comprehensive plans for dealing with contingencies. Maria found herself taking a leadership role in the planning process, helping to coordinate the various elements of the operation while ensuring that every team member understood their responsibilities. The execution of the mission required split-second decision-making and flawless coordination under the most realistic combat conditions that could be safely simulated. Maria's team successfully infiltrated to their target, conducted their raid, captured the required intelligence materials, and extracted without suffering any casualties or losing any critical equipment. But the most significant moment of the exercise came when their planned extraction route was compromised by unexpected opposing force activity. Maria found herself in a leadership position when the team leader was injured during the initial phase of the extraction, and she had to make critical decisions about how to adapt their plan while ensuring the safety of all team members. Drawing on everything she had learned during her years of military training, Maria quickly assessed the situation, identified alternative options, and implemented a modified extraction plan that successfully brought all team members to safety. Her performance during this crisis demonstrated the kind of leadership and decision-making ability that the instructors were looking for in potential reconnaissance Marines. The final week of selection was designed as a culmination of all previous training, with the remaining candidates facing their ultimate test in the form of a comprehensive field exercise that would determine their suitability for reconnaissance operations. Only 18 candidates remained from the original group of 28, and all of them understood that this final week would determine who would earn the title of Reconnaissance Marine. The final exercise was conducted over 7 days in terrain that presented every possible challenge the instructors could devise. The candidates were required to demonstrate competence in all areas of reconnaissance operations while operating under conditions of extreme physical and mental stress. Maria began the final week with confidence in her preparation and abilities, but she also understood that this exercise would push her beyond anything she had previously experienced. The instructors had designed the exercise to test not only technical competence, but the indefinable qualities of character and determination that distinguished exceptional Marines from merely competent ones. On the 3rd day of the final exercise, Maria faced her most challenging moment of the entire selection process. Her team had been moving continuously for over 36 hours, carrying heavy loads across difficult terrain while conducting surveillance on multiple targets. Physical exhaustion, sleep deprivation, and mental stress had pushed all of them near their breaking points. During a particularly demanding movement through mountainous terrain, one of Maria's teammates, Corporal Lisa Johnson, suffered a severe ankle injury that prevented her from continuing under her own power. The team was still several hours away from their next checkpoint, and they were operating in an area where medical evacuation was not immediately available. Maria found herself facing the most difficult decision of her military career. The team could request emergency extraction for Corporal Johnson, but doing so would automatically disqualify all of them from completing the selection process. Alternatively, they could continue the exercise while supporting their injured teammate, but this would require them to carry her equipment in addition to their own while maintaining the pace necessary to complete their assigned mission. The decision ultimately belonged to Corporal Johnson, who insisted that her teammates should request evacuation for her while continuing the exercise themselves. But Maria understood that abandoning a teammate, even at her own insistence, would contradict everything she had learned about the values that reconnaissance Marines held sacred. "We started this together, and we're going to finish it together," Maria told her team. "Johnson, we're going to carry you and your equipment, and we're all going to complete this exercise successfully." The next 18 hours were the most physically and mentally demanding of Maria's life. Her team took turns supporting Corporal Johnson while carrying additional equipment loads that pushed their endurance to absolute limits. They maintained their assigned pace, completed all of their surveillance requirements, and reached their final checkpoint within the required time frame. When they reported their completion of the exercise to the evaluating instructor, Master Sergeant Taylor, all 4 team members were on the verge of collapse from exhaustion. But they had successfully completed the most demanding challenge of the reconnaissance selection process while demonstrating the kind of teamwork and determination that defined the reconnaissance community. Master Sergeant Taylor's evaluation of their performance would become legendary among future classes of reconnaissance candidates. "This team just demonstrated why we put candidates through this selection process," he told the assembled instructors. They faced an unexpected challenge that tested everything they had learned about reconnaissance operations, and they chose to succeed as a team rather than allow individual concerns to compromise their mission or their teammates. The graduation ceremony for the reconnaissance selection course was held on a Friday morning, with the successful candidates' families and unit commanders present to witness their achievement. Of the 28 Marines who had started the course, only 14 had successfully completed all requirements and earned the right to continue in the reconnaissance training pipeline. Maria stood at attention with her fellow graduates, wearing the reconnaissance insignia that represented the culmination of years of preparation and weeks of the most demanding training she had ever experienced. But more than the insignia itself, she valued the knowledge that she had discovered capabilities within herself that she had never known existed. Major Rodriguez addressed the graduating class with words that Maria would remember for the rest of her military career. "You have proven that you possess the technical skills, physical capabilities, and mental toughness required for reconnaissance operations. But more importantly, you have demonstrated the character and values that make reconnaissance Marines worthy of the trust placed in them by their fellow Marines and their nation." The ceremony concluded with the presentation of reconnaissance insignia to each graduate, a moment that represented not only individual achievement, but membership in a community of elite Marines who had proven themselves capable of operating effectively under the most demanding conditions possible. As Maria received her reconnaissance insignia, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the small town in Texas where she had been told she would never amount to anything, through the challenges of recruit training and infantry service, to this pinnacle of military achievement. Every step had prepared her for the responsibilities she was about to assume. But she also understood that graduation from reconnaissance selection was not an end, but a beginning. She would now continue to the advanced phases of reconnaissance training, learning the specialized skills required for specific types of operations. More importantly, she would soon be assigned to a reconnaissance unit where she would apply everything she had learned in actual operations that carried real consequences. The celebration with her fellow graduates was subdued, but meaningful. They had shared an experience that had tested every aspect of their capabilities and revealed reserves of strength and determination that none of them had known they possessed. More than that, they had formed bonds that would last throughout their military careers and beyond. As Maria prepared for the next phase of her training, she reflected on the lessons she had learned during the selection process. The most important discovery had been that her individual capabilities, while significant, were most valuable when applied as part of a team dedicated to shared objectives and mutual support. She thought about the Marines who had not successfully completed the selection process, understanding that their failure did not reflect any deficiency in their character or worth as Marines. The reconnaissance community required a specific combination of attributes that not everyone possessed, and there was no shame in discovering that one's talents lay in other areas of military service. But for Maria, the successful completion of reconnaissance selection represented the fulfillment of a dream that had been years in the making. She had discovered that she possessed not only the physical capabilities required for special operations, but the mental toughness and character necessary to earn a place among the elite Marines who conducted the most demanding and critical missions in the Corps. As she looked toward the future, Maria understood that her journey was far from complete. The advanced training that lay ahead would be demanding in different ways, and her eventual assignment to an operational reconnaissance unit would present challenges that she could not yet imagine. But she also knew that she had proven herself capable of rising to meet whatever challenges awaited her. The recognition that she had achieved something extraordinary was tempered by the knowledge that greater challenges and responsibilities lay ahead. But Maria had learned during the selection process that her capabilities expanded to meet whatever demands were placed upon them, and she looked forward to discovering what else she might be able to accomplish. The helicopter's rotors beat a steady rhythm against the pre-dawn darkness as Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez checked her equipment one final time. 6 months had passed since her graduation from reconnaissance training, and she was now preparing for her first operational mission as a reconnaissance Marine with 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion. The weight of responsibility felt heavier than any pack she had carried during training, because this time, the consequences of failure would extend far beyond her individual career. The mission briefing had taken place 12 hours earlier in a secure facility where Maria learned that her 4-person team would be conducting deep reconnaissance in support of a larger Marine Expeditionary Unit operation. Intelligence reports suggested that hostile forces were operating in an area that would be critical to the success of the overall mission, but the exact nature and strength of these forces remained unknown. Team Leader Staff Sergeant David Kim was a veteran of multiple reconnaissance deployments who had earned a reputation for thorough planning and flawless execution under pressure. During the mission briefing, he had emphasized that their reconnaissance mission would directly influence the safety of hundreds of Marines who would be conducting follow-on operations based on the intelligence they gathered. Rodriguez, Staff Sergeant Kim had said, "This is what we trained for. Everything we learned during selection and advanced training has been preparation for missions exactly like this one. The Marines conducting the assault depend on us to provide accurate, timely intelligence about what they'll be facing." Maria's teammates were Corporal Ryan Thompson, a communications specialist with 2 years of reconnaissance experience, and Lance Corporal Marcus Williams, a recent graduate of reconnaissance training who was conducting his first operational mission. The team composition provided a balance of experience and fresh capabilities that reflected the reconnaissance community's approach to personnel management. The helicopter insertion would take place in complete darkness, 30 kilometers from their objective area. From the landing zone, they would move on foot through difficult terrain while avoiding detection by hostile forces that intelligence reports suggested were operating throughout the region. Their mission was to establish an observation post overlooking a valley that would be used for the larger operation, gathering detailed information about enemy positions, strength, and activities. As the helicopter approached the landing zone, Maria felt the familiar combination of excitement and apprehension that had become her constant companion during challenging operations. But this time, the feeling was intensified by the knowledge that real Marines would be making life and death decisions based on the accuracy and completeness of the intelligence her team provided. The insertion went smoothly, with all 4 team members and their equipment landing safely in the designated area. Within minutes, they had moved away from the landing zone and established their first checkpoint, confirming their position and beginning the careful approach toward their objective area. The movement to their observation post required 8 hours of careful navigation through mountainous terrain that provided numerous opportunities for both concealment and ambush. Staff Sergeant Kim's route planning had identified waypoints that would allow them to move with minimal exposure while maintaining their timeline for establishing the observation post. During the approach movement, Maria found herself drawing on every skill she had developed during her years of training and preparation. The terrain was more challenging than anything she had encountered during training exercises, requiring precise navigation and constant awareness of their surroundings. More challenging still was the knowledge that hostile forces were operating in the area, making every sound and movement a potential indicator of their presence. The team established their observation post in a location that provided excellent visibility of the target valley while offering concealment from enemy patrols. Over the next 36 hours, they would maintain constant surveillance of the area while documenting every significant activity and preparing detailed report for transmission to the Marine Expeditionary Unit headquarters. Maria's assignment within the team was to serve as the primary observer, using sophisticated optics and surveillance equipment to monitor the target area while maintaining detailed logs of all activities. The responsibility required her to remain alert and focused for extended periods while identifying patterns and anomalies that might be significant to the planning of follow-on operations. During the first 12 hours of observation, Maria documented what appeared to be routine activity in the valley. Small groups of personnel moved between various positions, vehicles traveled on established routes, and defensive positions appear to be manned according to predictable schedules. But as she continued her surveillance, she began to notice subtle indicators that suggested something more significant was taking place. The movement patterns she observed didn't match the typical activities that intelligence reports had suggested they would encounter. Instead of the small, disorganized groups that had been described in their briefings, Maria observed evidence of larger, more disciplined units that appeared to be conducting coordinated operations according to a comprehensive plan. More concerning still, the defensive positions she observed were more extensive and sophisticated than intelligence reports had indicated. Rather than the basic fortifications that had been described, Maria could see evidence of prepared positions, camouflaged equipment, and interlocking fields of fire that suggested a much more capable and organized enemy force. "Kim," she whispered to her team leader, "I'm seeing activity that doesn't match our intelligence briefings. This looks like a much larger and more organized force than we were expecting." Staff Sergeant Kim moved to Maria's position and studied the valley through his own optics, confirming her observations. After several minutes of careful analysis, he nodded grimly. "You're right, Rodriguez. What we're looking at is significantly different from what we were briefed to expect. This information needs to get back to headquarters immediately." The team's communications specialist, Corporal Thompson, prepared to transmit their initial report while Staff Sergeant Kim and Maria continued their detailed observation of the valley. The information they were gathering would require significant adjustments to the planned operation, potentially affecting the safety and success of the entire Marine Expeditionary Unit. As Maria continued her surveillance, she noticed increased activity around what appeared to be a command facility located on the far side of the valley. Personnel were moving with greater urgency, and she could observe additional equipment being positioned around the facility. Most significantly, she observed what appeared to be senior personnel conducting what looked like a planning session or briefing. "Kim, there's something happening around that command facility," Maria reported. "Increased activity, possible senior leadership, and what looks like preparation for something significant." Staff Sergeant Kim joined Maria in observing the command facility, using high-powered optics to gather as much detail as possible about the activities they were witnessing. After several minutes of careful observation, he made a decision that would demonstrate the kind of initiative and tactical thinking that distinguished exceptional reconnaissance Marines. Rodriguez, I want you to continue observing the command facility while Thompson and I prepare a detailed report on what we've observed so far. Williams will maintain security and watch for any signs that we've been detected. This information is too important to delay, but we also need to gather as much detail as possible before we transmit. Over the next 4 hours, Maria maintained focused surveillance of the command facility while documenting every significant activity. What she observed exceeded anything she had expected to encounter during her first operational mission. The facility appeared to be the center of a sophisticated operation involving significantly more personnel and equipment than intelligence estimates had suggested. Most critically, Maria observed clear indicators that the enemy forces were preparing for operations that could directly threaten the planned Marine Expeditionary Unit mission. Equipment positioning, personnel movements, and coordination activities all suggested that the enemy was aware of potential Marine operations and was preparing countermeasures. Kim, Maria reported, based on what I'm observing, I believe the enemy forces are preparing for operations that could compromise our planned mission. The level of organization and preparation I'm seeing suggests they may have advanced knowledge of our intentions. Staff Sergeant Kim understood the implications of Maria's observations immediately. If the enemy forces were indeed preparing for the Marine operations, the planned mission would need to be significantly modified or potentially canceled entirely. The intelligence his team was gathering could prevent what might otherwise have been a disastrous engagement. The team's detailed report was transmitted to Marine Expeditionary Unit headquarters that evening, providing comprehensive information about enemy strength, positions, activities, and apparent preparations for operations against Marine forces. The report represented exactly the kind of critical intelligence that reconnaissance Marines were trained to provide, potentially saving the lives of Marines who would otherwise have walked into a well-prepared ambush. The response from headquarters confirmed the significance of the intelligence Maria's team had gathered. The planned operation was immediately modified based on their reports, with additional forces allocated and alternative approaches developed to account for the stronger enemy presence they had identified. But the mission was far from complete. Headquarters requested that the reconnaissance team remain in position to provide continued surveillance and real-time intelligence updates as the modified operation was executed. This meant that Maria and her teammates would be operating in an increasingly dangerous environment as military operations intensified in the surrounding area. Over the following 72 hours, Maria's team provided continuous intelligence updates while observing the most significant military operations of their careers. From their concealed observation post, they watched as Marine forces engaged enemy positions throughout the valley, using the intelligence provided by the reconnaissance team to achieve tactical superiority and minimize casualties. Maria found herself serving as the eyes and ears for Marine commanders who were making critical decisions based on her observations and reports. The weight of responsibility was enormous, but she also felt a profound sense of purpose as she watched her intelligence being used to protect Marine lives and ensure mission success. During one particularly intense period of the operation, Maria observed enemy forces attempting to reposition heavy weapons that could threaten Marine aircraft, providing close air support. Her immediate report of this activity allowed Marine commanders to direct counter-battery fire that eliminated the threat before it could affect ongoing operations. Rodriguez, Staff Sergeant Kim, said after they had transmitted the report about the enemy weapons repositioning, "That's exactly the kind of real-time intelligence that makes the difference between mission success and mission failure. You potentially save the lives of pilots and aircrew by identifying that threat." The recognition from her team leader was gratifying, but Maria understood that her individual contribution was only meaningful as part of the comprehensive intelligence effort being conducted by her entire team. Corporal Thompson's expertise in communications had ensured that their reports reached headquarters quickly and accurately. Lance Corporal Williams's vigilance in maintaining security had prevented their detection despite the increased enemy activity in their area. Staff Sergeant Kim's leadership had coordinated their efforts and made the tactical decisions that allowed them to continue providing valuable intelligence while remaining undetected. On the fourth day of continuous operations, Maria's team received orders to extract from their observation post and move to a new location where they would continue surveillance of enemy withdrawal routes. The new mission would require them to move through an area where Marine and enemy forces were actively engaged, presenting challenges that exceeded anything they had encountered during training. The movement began during pre-dawn darkness, with the team traveling light and fast to minimize their exposure in the active combat zone. Maria found herself applying every skill she had developed in camouflage, movement techniques, and threat awareness as they navigated through an area where the margin for error was measured in life and death rather than training scores. During the movement, the team encountered unexpected enemy activity that forced them to take cover in a location that provided concealment but limited options for continued movement. For several tense hours, they remained motionless while enemy personnel moved through the area around their hiding position. Maria's experience during reconnaissance training had prepared her for the physical and mental challenges of remaining motionless for extended periods under stress, but the reality of enemy forces moving within meters of their position created a level of tension that no training exercise could replicate. Every sound, every movement, and every breath had to be controlled to avoid detection that could result in a firefight that would compromise their mission and potentially cost lives. When the area finally cleared of enemy activity, the team was able to continue their movement to the new observation post. But the experience had provided Maria with insights into reconnaissance operations that no amount of training could have conveyed. She understood now that successful reconnaissance required not only technical skills and physical capabilities, but the psychological resilience to operate effectively when discovery could have fatal consequences. The new observation post provided visibility of the routes that enemy forces were using to withdraw from the valley, allowing Maria's team to provide intelligence that would be used to plan interdiction operations and prevent enemy forces from escaping to conduct future operations against Marine forces. Over the following week, Maria documented the passage of numerous enemy groups, identifying their strength, equipment, and apparent destinations. This intelligence was immediately valuable for tactical operations, but it also provided strategic information about enemy capabilities and intentions that would be useful for future mission planning. The most significant observation during this phase of the mission came when Maria identified what appeared to be senior enemy leadership traveling with a heavily guarded convoy along one of the withdrawal routes. The intelligence value of capturing or eliminating these individuals was enormous, potentially disrupting enemy operations throughout the region. "Kim, I've got what looks like high-value targets in that convoy," Maria reported. The security measures and movement patterns suggest these are senior personnel who could be extremely valuable for intelligence purposes. Staff Sergeant Kim confirmed Maria's observations and immediately transmitted a detailed report to headquarters, providing precise location information and movement predictions that could be used to plan an interdiction operation. Within hours, Marine forces had successfully intercepted the convoy, capturing several high-ranking enemy personnel whose intelligence value exceeded all expectations. The success of the interdiction operation, based on intelligence provided by Maria's team, represented the kind of strategic impact that reconnaissance Marines were capable of achieving. Beyond the immediate tactical value of removing enemy leadership from the battlefield, the captured personnel provided information that would influence Marine operations throughout the region for months to come. As the reconnaissance mission continued, Maria found herself developing capabilities and confidence that exceeded anything she had achieved during training. The combination of technical skills, physical demands, and psychological pressure had pushed her to discover reserves of strength and competence that she had not known she possessed. But perhaps more importantly, she had learned that reconnaissance Marines operated as part of a larger team that extended far beyond their immediate four-person unit. Their success depended not only on their individual capabilities, but on their ability to provide intelligence that supported the efforts of hundreds of other Marines engaged in complex operations. The mission concluded after 2 weeks of continuous operations during which Maria's team had provided intelligence that directly contributed to the success of the overall Marine Expeditionary Unit operation. Enemy forces had been defeated, key objectives had been secured, and Marine casualties had been minimized through the effective use of accurate, timely intelligence. During the debriefing that followed their extraction from the operational area, Marine Expeditionary Unit commanders specifically recognized the contribution made by Maria's reconnaissance team. Colonel Sarah Mitchell, the MEU commander, personally thanked them for intelligence that had prevented what could have been a costly engagement and enabled the successful completion of all assigned objectives. Your team provided exactly the kind of intelligence that makes the difference between success and failure in complex operations, Colonel Mitchell told them. The accuracy and timeliness of your reports allowed us to adapt our plans to the actual situation we encountered rather than the situation we expected to encounter. That adaptability was crucial to our success. For Maria, the recognition from senior leadership was gratifying, but the most meaningful feedback came from the Marines who had directly benefited from the intelligence her team had provided. Pilots thanked them for identifying threats that could have resulted in aircraft losses. Infantry Marines thanked them for information that had allowed them to avoid ambushes and achieve surprise in their own operations. The knowledge that her work had directly contributed to the safety and success of fellow Marines provided Maria with a sense of purpose and accomplishment that exceeded anything she had experienced in her military career. She understood now that reconnaissance Marines occupied a unique position in military operations, serving as the link between strategic planning and tactical execution. As Maria reflected on her first operational mission as a reconnaissance Marine, she realized that her journey from that small town in Texas had led her to exactly where she belonged. The challenges she had overcome, the training she had completed, and the capabilities she had developed had all been preparation for the responsibilities she now carried. But she also understood that this mission was only the beginning of her service as a reconnaissance Marine. The skills she had demonstrated and the experience she had gained would be the foundation for increasingly challenging and important missions in the future. The success of her first operational mission had proven that she belonged in the reconnaissance community and was capable of contributing meaningfully to the most critical missions conducted by Marine forces. But more than that, it had provided her with the confidence and experience necessary to take on greater responsibilities and more challenging assignments in the future. As she prepared for her next mission, Maria carried with her the knowledge that she had achieved something extraordinary. From the uncertain young woman who had enlisted in the Marine Corps to prove herself, she had become a reconnaissance Marine whose skills and judgment were trusted with the lives of her fellow Marines and the success of critical military operations. The transformation was complete, but the journey was far from over. Each mission would bring new challenges and opportunities to expand her capabilities and contribute to the success of Marine Corps operations around the world. Maria Rodriguez had found her calling, and she was ready to meet whatever challenges lay ahead. 3 years had passed since Maria's first operational mission, and she now stood before the largest assembly of Marines she had ever addressed. The gymnasium at Camp Lejeune was packed with over 2,000 Marines from across the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force, all gathered to witness what many believed would be either a historic breakthrough or a spectacular failure. Gunnery Sergeant Maria Rodriguez had spent the previous 18 months developing and refining a new tactical doctrine for reconnaissance operations in urban environments. Her proposal challenged conventional approaches that had been used for decades, suggesting innovative techniques based on her extensive operational experience and deep understanding of modern warfare challenges. The path to this moment had begun 6 months earlier during a reconnaissance mission in a complex urban environment overseas. Maria's team had been tasked with gathering intelligence on enemy activities in a densely populated city where traditional reconnaissance techniques proved inadequate for the challenges they encountered. The enemy forces they were observing had adapted to the urban environment in ways that made conventional surveillance extremely difficult. They used civilian populations as cover, operated from locations that were difficult to observe from traditional vantage points, and employed counter-surveillance techniques that neutralized many of the methods that reconnaissance Marines had relied on for years. During that mission, Maria had developed improvised techniques that proved remarkably effective in overcoming these challenges. By thinking creatively about how to use the urban environment to their advantage, her team had successfully gathered critical intelligence that would have been impossible to obtain using standard procedures. When Maria returned from the deployment, she had presented her observations and recommendations to her commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel James Patterson. Colonel Patterson was an experienced reconnaissance Marine who understood the importance of tactical innovation and was always looking for ways to improve his unit's capabilities. Rodriguez, Colonel Patterson had said after reviewing Maria's detailed report, "What you've described represents a significant advancement in our approach to urban reconnaissance. These techniques could revolutionize how we conduct operations in complex environments." Colonel Patterson had encouraged Maria to develop her ideas into a comprehensive tactical doctrine that could be tested and potentially adopted throughout the reconnaissance community. The project would require extensive research, detailed planning, and the development of training programs that could teach other Marines the techniques she had pioneered. Maria had thrown herself into the project with the same intensity and dedication she had brought to every challenge in her military career. She spent months researching urban warfare tactics, studying the experiences of reconnaissance units in similar environments, and consulting with experts in urban operations from throughout the military. But the most challenging aspect of developing the new doctrine was designing practical exercises that would demonstrate its effectiveness to skeptical observers. Maria understood that many experienced Marines would resist changes to procedures that had been proven effective over years of operations, regardless of their theoretical advantages. The demonstration she was about to conduct had been designed to show conclusively that her new techniques could achieve results that were impossible using conventional methods. Two identical scenarios had been prepared, with different teams attempting to gather the same intelligence using traditional techniques versus Maria's innovative approaches. The stakes could not have been higher for Maria personally. Success would validate years of work and potentially lead to adoption of her techniques throughout the Marine Corps. Failure would not only end her hopes of contributing to tactical innovation, but could damage her reputation within the reconnaissance community. As Maria stood before the assembled Marines, she felt the weight of their attention and the significance of what she was about to attempt. Among the observers were senior officers who would decide whether her innovations merited further development, peer Marines whose respect she valued above any formal recognition, and junior Marines who might benefit from improved techniques if her demonstration proved successful. Major General Robert Collins, the commanding general of the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force, served as the senior observer for the demonstration. General Collins was a veteran of multiple combat deployments who understood both the importance of tactical innovation and the risks associated with improving techniques. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Collins announced to the assembled Marines, "today we will observe a demonstration of innovative reconnaissance techniques developed by Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez. These techniques represent a potential advancement in our capabilities for urban operations, but they must prove their worth through practical application." The demonstration began with a briefing on the scenario that both teams would face. A complex urban environment had been constructed that replicated the challenges reconnaissance Marines encountered in actual operations. Enemy forces, played by Marines from the Infantry Training Battalion, would be operating according to realistic tactics and procedures designed to detect and counter reconnaissance activities. The first team, led by an experienced reconnaissance Marine using conventional techniques, would attempt to gather specific intelligence about enemy activities within the simulated urban area. Their performance would establish the baseline against which Maria's innovative techniques would be measured. Maria watched intently as the first team began their approach to the urban environment, using the infiltration and surveillance techniques that have been standard for reconnaissance operations for years. The team leader was Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, a veteran reconnaissance Marine with multiple combat deployments who was known for his technical competence and tactical proficiency. Staff Sergeant Torres and his team moved carefully through the simulated urban environment, using buildings and terrain features for concealment while attempting to establish observation positions that would allow them to gather the required intelligence. Their approach was methodical and professional, representing the highest standards of conventional reconnaissance techniques. But, as Maria had anticipated, the conventional techniques proved inadequate for the challenges presented by the urban environment. The enemy forces, using realistic counter-surveillance procedures, detected indicators of the reconnaissance team's presence and began systematic searches that forced the team to withdraw before they could gather complete intelligence. After 2 hours of operations, Staff Sergeant Torres extracted his team with only partial success in their intelligence-gathering mission. They had identified some enemy positions and activities, but significant gaps remained in their understanding of enemy capabilities and intentions within the urban area. The partial success achieved by the first team was exactly what Maria had expected based on her operational experience in similar environments. Conventional reconnaissance techniques, while highly effective in rural and wilderness areas, faced significant limitations when applied to complex urban terrain with sophisticated enemy counter-surveillance capabilities. Torres conducted that operation exactly as any competent reconnaissance Marine would have, General Collins observed to his staff. If Rodriguez's techniques can achieve significantly better results under the same conditions, that would represent a genuine advancement in our capabilities. Now, it was Maria's turn to demonstrate the techniques she had spent years developing and months preparing for this moment. Her team consisted of Marines she had personally trained in the innovative procedures, ensuring that their performance would accurately reflect the potential of her new approaches. The key differences in Maria's techniques involve creative use of the urban environment in ways that conventional reconnaissance doctrine did not address. Rather than attempting to avoid the civilian population and urban infrastructure, her methods incorporated these elements as tools for achieving reconnaissance objectives while remaining undetected. Maria's team began their infiltration using routes and methods that appeared unconventional to observers familiar with standard reconnaissance procedures. Instead of moving around the edges of populated areas, they moved through them, using civilian activity patterns as concealment for their own movements. The innovation extended beyond movement techniques to include observation methods that took advantage of urban infrastructure in ways that had never been systematically incorporated into reconnaissance doctrine. Maria's team established observation positions that provided superior visibility of target areas while offering concealment that was virtually impossible for enemy forces to detect. Most importantly, Maria's techniques included counter-surveillance procedures specifically designed for urban environments, allowing her team to detect and avoid enemy search activities while continuing to gather the required intelligence. As Maria's team moved through the simulated urban environment, their progress was monitored by observers who could see the effectiveness of the new techniques in real time. The Marines observing the demonstration began to understand that they were witnessing something genuinely innovative rather than minor modifications to existing procedures. "Look at how they're using the civilian population as cover," one observer noted. "They're not avoiding contact, they're using it as concealment. That's completely contrary to everything we've been taught, but it's working." Another observer pointed out the observation techniques being employed. Their surveillance positions are integrated into the urban infrastructure in ways that make them virtually invisible. Enemy forces could search for hours without detecting those positions. Over the course of the 4-hour demonstration, Maria's team successfully gathered complete intelligence on all assigned targets while remaining undetected by enemy counter-surveillance activities. Their success was not only comprehensive but achieved with greater speed and efficiency than conventional techniques could have provided. The contrast between the two approaches was immediately apparent to all observers. Where the first team had achieved partial success before being forced to withdraw, Maria's team had completed their entire mission while maintaining complete operational security. General Collins was visibly impressed by what he had witnessed. During the debriefing that followed the demonstration, he questioned Maria extensively about the theoretical foundations of her techniques and their potential applications in actual combat operations. Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez, General Collins said, "What we observed today represents exactly the kind of tactical innovation that gives our Marines advantages over potential adversaries. These techniques could significantly enhance our reconnaissance capabilities in urban environments." But the general also raised important questions about the broader implications of adopting Maria's innovations. How do we ensure that Marines throughout the reconnaissance community can be trained to the level of proficiency required for these techniques? What are the risks if these methods are employed by Marines who haven't mastered the underlying principles? Maria had anticipated these questions and had prepared comprehensive answers based on her months of research and development. She explained that successful implementation would require intensive training programs that emphasized not only the technical aspects of the new techniques, but the tactical judgment required to apply them appropriately. "General," Maria responded, "these techniques are more complex than conventional reconnaissance procedures, but they're also more effective when properly applied. The training challenge is significant, but the operational advantages justify the investment in developing Marine capabilities." The demonstration concluded with commitments from senior leadership to further evaluate Maria's innovations and develop implementation plans that could bring them to operational reconnaissance units throughout the Marine Corps. For Maria, the success represented validation of years of work and the achievement of her goal of contributing meaningfully to Marine Corps tactical capabilities. But perhaps more important than the formal recognition was the reaction from her fellow reconnaissance Marines. The Marines who had observed the demonstration understood that they had witnessed techniques that could enhance their effectiveness and safety in future operations. Staff Sergeant Torres, whose team had demonstrated conventional techniques, approached Maria after the demonstration to offer his congratulations and ask about opportunities to learn the new methods. "Rodriguez," he said, "what you demonstrated today could change how we conduct urban reconnaissance. I want to learn everything you can teach me about these techniques." The interest from experienced Marines like Staff Sergeant Torres confirmed Maria's belief that her innovations addressed real operational needs rather than theoretical problems. The techniques she had developed were not academic exercises, but practical solutions to challenges that reconnaissance Marines faced regularly in complex environments. In the weeks that followed the demonstration, Maria found herself at the center of efforts to develop training programs and implementation plans for her reconnaissance innovations. Senior leadership throughout the Marine Corps expressed interest in incorporating her techniques into standard reconnaissance doctrine, representing exactly the kind of impact she had hoped to achieve. The process of institutional adoption would be complex and time-consuming, requiring extensive testing, training development, and gradual implementation across multiple units. But the foundation had been established, and Maria's techniques would eventually become part of the reconnaissance capabilities available to Marines operating in urban environments around the world. For Maria personally, the success of the demonstration represented the culmination of a journey that had begun in that small town in Texas, where she had been told she would never amount to anything significant. Through determination, hard work, and willingness to challenge herself repeatedly, she had not only succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, but had contributed innovations that would enhance Marine Corps capabilities for years to come. As she reflected on her achievements, Maria understood that her individual success was meaningful primarily because of its contribution to the effectiveness and safety of Marines who would conduct reconnaissance operations in the future. The techniques she had developed would potentially save lives, enhance mission success, and provide American forces with tactical advantages over their adversaries. The recognition from senior leadership was gratifying, but the most meaningful feedback came from Marines who had actually used the techniques she had developed. Their enthusiasm and eagerness to learn represented the true measure of her contribution to the reconnaissance community. 6 months after the demonstration, Maria received orders assigning her to the Marine Corps Reconnaissance Training Company, where she would serve as the lead instructor for urban reconnaissance techniques. The assignment represented both recognition of her expertise and an opportunity to ensure that her innovations were properly integrated into Marine Corps training programs. The new assignment would require Maria to develop comprehensive training curricula, train instructor cadres, and oversee the implementation of her techniques throughout the reconnaissance community. It was exactly the kind of challenging and meaningful assignment she had hoped to earn through her years of preparation and proven performance. As Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez prepared for her new responsibilities, she carried with her the satisfaction of knowing that she had achieved her goal of discovering her true capabilities and contributing meaningfully to Marine Corps effectiveness. From the uncertain young woman who had enlisted to prove herself, she had become a reconnaissance Marine whose innovations would influence tactical operations for generations to come. The gymnasium demonstration had been the visible culmination of her achievements, but Maria understood that her most important contributions would be measured by the success and safety of Marines who would employ the techniques she had developed in actual combat operations around the world. Her journey from that small Texas town to the forefront of Marine Corps tactical innovation represented more than individual achievement. It demonstrated the possibilities available to anyone willing to challenge themselves repeatedly and pursue excellence without accepting artificial limitations. As she looked toward the future, Maria Rodriguez understood that her story was far from complete. Each new assignment would bring opportunities to expand her contributions to Marine Corps capabilities and continue the process of personal and professional growth that had defined her military career. But the foundation was solid, built on years of proven performance under the most demanding conditions and validated by innovations that had earned recognition from the highest levels of Marine Corps leadership. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Maria was confident in her ability to meet them with the same determination and excellence that had brought her to this point in her remarkable journey.